All right, I will say good morning. Let us begin. We have the great zchus today to begin the ninth chapter, the ninth and final chapter of Masechus Berachos. So today, Mishna Yomi will be learning Perek Tas Mishnayis Aleph and Beis, chapter 9, Mishnayis 1 and 2. So we'll say some really beautiful Mishnayis ahead of us. So the Mishnah says as follows: Mishnah Aleph, Haroeh Makom Shena'asu Bo Nisim LiYisrael. If a person sees a place in which miracles occurred for the Jewish people. And the Berachos gives a number of different examples of this. He says, you go Mabros Yamsuf, you see the place where Klal Yisrael crossed the Yamsuf. Or he says, you see the stone that Moshe Rabbeinu sat on during Klal Yisrael's war with Amalek. So you see a place where a major miracle happened for Klal Yisrael. Omer Baruch Sha'asa Nisim La'avosinu B'makom Hazeh. You make the bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Olam. This bracha is with the name of Hashem. Sha'asa Nisim La'avosinu B'makom Hazeh, who has performed miracles for our forefathers in this place. Makom Shenekra Menu Avodos Kochavim. By the way, the Berachos also points out over here something very interesting. The Berachos says, Aval Anisa Diyochid. Kigon haroeh makom shenasa lo bones. So iyuv chayiv lebaruche baruch sha'asa lines b'makom hazeh. So I'll say, interestingly enough, if you had a miracle that was performed for you, person chas v'shalom was saved from a life-threatening circumstance, and it happened in a particular location, a person is obligated to say the bracha of Baruch Sha'asa Li Nes B'makom Hazeh. So the same way that when I see a place in which a historical miracle occurred, we say Baruch Sha'asa Nisim Lavosinu B'makom Hazeh. Thank you, Hashem, for performing miracles for my forefathers in this place. If there's a miracle that happened to me in a particular location, Baruch Sha'asa Li Nes B'makom Hazeh. Thank you, Hashem, for performing for me a miracle in this place. And the Berachos says, by the way, also then my children and grandchildren would have an obligation to make the bracha of Baruch Sha'asa Nes La'avosai. They would have an obligation to thank Hashem for performing a miracle for their father in this place. Interesting, very interesting halacha. So we'll say back to Mishnah. Makom, the reality is, the true reality is, we should really be making this bracha each and every day, every single place we go, because we are probably fully unaware of the incredible miracles that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does for us every single day. Like we say in Modim, Va'al nisecha shebachol yom imanu. Thank you, Hashem, for the miracles that you perform for us each and every day. We're usually just totally unaware of the beautiful miracles. So probably every step we take deserves a bracha, Baruch Sha'asa Lines B'makom Hazeh. But of course, the Mishnah referring to miracles which we recognize and are able to truly understand. So the Mishnah goes on. Makom shenekra min avodos kochavim. But let's say if you go to a place where there used to be entrenched idolatry, but then the idolatry was uprooted. Omer Baruch sha'akar avodah zara me'artzenu. Right? Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech olam. Sha'akar avodah zara me'artzenu. Who has uprooted avodah zara from our land. Now it's interesting to note over here that obviously from the lashon of the bracha, from the wording of the bracha, this is about Eretz Yisrael, right? Thank you, Hashem, for uprooting idolatry from our land. Indicates that this is Avodah Zarah that was in Eretz Yisrael, but then was uprooted from Eretz Yisrael. Beautiful. We'll say Mishnah Beis. Now we get into some, all fascinating topics. Ala Zikin. So we'll say on Zikin. Now Rashi says over the Berachos says over here, Zikin is Kochav Hanira Kimoshe Poseach Harakia. V'yora kechetz mimakom lemakom. So this would be a comet, right? A comet. It's actually interesting. We're going to see that it could be a comet or a meteor, right? Both is going to be the same thing. But the fact that it goes in and it says that Yora kechetz mimakom lemakom inami kochav shnir k'mo sheyesh lo zanav aruch. It's a star that looks like it has a long tail. So it's translated differently in different places, either as a meteor or as a comet. But either way, for our purposes, they're both fine. Va'al hazvos. Zvos is an earthquake. Brakim is lightning. That's brakim. Al hara'amim is thunder. It's if you look at the Berachos says on ra'amim, kol hanishma barakia me'ananim sheshofchin mayim zemizeh. It is the sound that is heard in the heavens when the clouds pour water from one cloud into the next. It's interesting just to see what the attribution to thunder was. Good. Va'ala ruchos. Ruchos means very strong winds. Rashi says, keep saying Rashi. Bartanura. Al ruchos shebaim bisara v'zat. This is talking about like gale force winds. Right, storm winds. They only come in frequently. So in all of these natural events, Moses, so think about this list. So you've got meteors, comets, earthquakes, winds. Omer Baruch Shekocho Ugvuraso Male Olam. Person says the bracha Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Olam. Right, Hashem, you are the source of all blessing. Shekocho Ugvuraso, whose strength and whose might fills the world. Because we'll say the idea being that each of these natural events is a it comes across, right, as a manifestation of divine might. That's the bracha. And I will say, we know that halacha l'maisa, we say somewhat different brachos for some of these things. But this is what the Mishna says. Al ha'harim v'al ha'gvaos v'al yamim v'al naros. So we'll say, from large mountains, large valleys, large bodies of water, rivers, vast deserts, Omer Baruch Mose Maaseh Berachos. So we'll say when you see an incredibly just beautiful natural wonder, large mountains, large valleys, large bodies of water, large rivers, large deserts, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Olam, Hashem, you are the source of all blessing, Oseh Maaseh Berachos, who goes out and creates incredible creations. Rabbi Huda says, Haroa es hayam gadol. If one sees the great sea, then Rabbi said, this is very interesting. So the Bartanura says, Hayam gadol yam okinus shemakif haolam. This refers to the okinus, which is not really, often people say it's the Atlantic. It's not the Atlantic. It's referring to some great body of water. But Pashtos, it would refer to any of the major oceans. Although, interestingly enough, I saw in the notes over here that they quote opinions that say, he quotes in the Bear, he says, B'derech klal hayam hagadol hu ma shenikra biyamenu yam hatichon, which is the Mediterranean. Right? So some say the Yam HaGadol is the Mediterranean. She'eretz Yisrael shochenes al sefaso. That Eretz Yisrael goes ahead and resides by its banks. He quotes over here, who's he quoting that from? He is quoting that from the Shalas Tshuva Sarash, the Abu Draham. Okay, usually Abu said the way this is understood halacha l'maisa is that whenever one sees any one of the major oceans, so the bracha that is said is Baruch, well, again, Rabbi Huda says, the bracha that is said is Baruch Sha'asa Asayam HaGadol. Right? Hashem, you are the source of all blessing. Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Olam, who has created the great sea. Bisman Shira, also the prakim. So we'll say, so remember again, all of this is said when you only see these events episodically. In other words, we'll say, you don't see this bracha all of the time, Oseh Maaseh Berachos. Only when you see these things, and by the way, this goes on everything. This goes on seeing the mountains, the valleys, the rivers, the oceans. Ultimately, again, only when you see it for intervals. What's the definition of an interval? 30 days. 30 days. So in other words, if you happen to have the schus to live, you live oceanfront in front of the Mediterranean, you're not saying this bracha every single day, but rather, again, only once every 30 days. Beautiful. Allah Gishamim, we'll say the Mishna ends off by saying, Allah Gishamim v'ala besoros tovos. Ultimately, again, when it comes to rains, right? Rains, and on good news, Omer Baruch Hatov V'Hametiv. One recites the bracha ultimately again of Blessed are you Hashem, who is good and bestows good. But I'll just mention to you, the bracha, we have two brachas. Part of my struggle in this is, we're not doing these sugyas halacha l'maisa, right? Again, if our exercise in Mishna Yomi is just to go through the Mishnah, to familiarize ourselves with the ideas. The halacha l'maisa is another component. I will just mention something very interesting, that the brachos of Hatov v'Hametiv and Shechianu are very often linked together. The fundamental difference between them is Shechianu is recited on something that is positive for you and you alone, versus Hatov v'Hametiv is a bracha that is recited for something that is positive for you and also has a positive impact on others. So that's why the examples over here is Geshamim. Geshem is a perfect example. Geshem is not just good for me, right? Right? When it rains, it's good for me, but it's also good for others. Or Besoros Tovos. Besoros Tovos, ultimately again, Good news. Hatov Amit. If you look at the Bartanura, he says something very interesting. He says, the Haki Mashma, I'm reading in the middle, Hatov V'Ametiv, Hatov L'Didei, it's good for me, V'Ametiv La'achrini. And it's also good for someone else. That's the distinction. If I get a new suit, Sasei Shachianu. Why? Who is it good for? Who is it good for? It's good for me. It's good for me. Does it have a positive impact on everyone else if I'm dressed nicely? I'm sure on some level it has an impact. But Lamaisa, the impact is for me. Masha'inkin, again, the rain, other things, Hatov V'Hametiv. Let's end off by saying, Vashmu Osros, and Chas Shalom about negative things. Omer, Baruch Dayan Ha'emes. I say, Hashem, you are the truthful judge. And I will say, interestingly enough, the bracha of Baruch Dayan Ha'emes is said different ways for different circumstances. When Chas Shalom, a person encounters a loss, a personal loss, person goes ahead and suffers the loss of one of the 7 close relatives, they say Baruch Dayan Ha'emes with the name of Hashem. Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, Dayan Ha'emes. When a person just hears unfortunate or tragic news, a person says Baruch Dayan Ha'emes without utilizing the name of Hashem in that circumstance. We'll stop over here, and Meretz Hashem will pick up with Mishnah Gimel and Dal tomorrow. Shkoyach.